Welcome to Commission Ed, the Air Force Officer Podcast. Here we explore the training and development of America's leaders and the application of air power and the profession of arms. The views expressed are those of the hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the United States Air Force, Department of Defense, or the U.S. government. The mention of companies by name is solely for the purpose of discussion and should not be implied as endorsement.
Welcome back to another episode of Commission Ed, the Air Force Officer Podcast. I'm Colin Slade.
And I'm Reed Gann, and we're your hosts for Commission Ed.
And this episode is being released on or around the Air Force's birthday, which you know what that means, Reed?
Happy birthday, Air Force, but it also means that you and I, against all odds, have been doing this for a calendar year.
That is crazy. Now, Reed, when we set out, when we first started talking about putting together a podcast, did you ever envision that we would actually, one, do it, two, do it for a sustained amount of time, three, actually make it to a full calendar year, releasing an episode every single week during that time?
No to all of the above. So, truth in advertising, I'm here because of you. You were the one that had this idea, and it took a better part of a month, I would say, of advocacy and convincing and quieting of my concerns before I was even starting to think this might be possible. So, no to all three of those. I did not think that we would do it. I did not think it would be going this long, and I didn't think that we would have released this much. But boy, I'm also really glad we did.
Oh, yeah. And now that we're at this point, looking to continue for potentially another full year. I mean, the fact that we are standing here at this point, having this conversation is just completely blowing my mind. I mean, I don't want to get on the mic here and just sing our praises, but I'm really excited by how well the last year has gone for this podcast. Super excited about our audience, their level of engagement. I'm super excited about the content that we've been able to put out, the interviews that we've had, and more than anything, I'm really excited about how I personally have developed and grown as an officer in the Air Force through this last year.
Yeah, totally concur. And as with anything, and you've heard us say this many times, it's critical to assess self. In successes and failures, you have to debrief. You have to hot wash. You have to stop and say, where are we? Where am I trying to go? And how am I doing along that path? Because otherwise, you're not going to end up where you want to be. So that's kind of the point and purpose of this, to celebrate today, but also to kind of look back and see where we've been and where we want to go.
Yeah, for sure. So let's kind of just quickly review the last year. What are some of the main things that have happened? Yes, we've released an episode every single week, and we'll get more into the data a little bit later, but let's hit major life events for you and for me that have taken place over this last year.
Yeah, sure. So I left for, performed, and returned from a 6-month deployment to the United Kingdom. Actually, when we started this whole thing, I was overseas. So coordinating across, 8 time zones to make this happen. We were both up at some odd times, recording in your evening, my morning, that kind of thing, making this all work. So that was a pretty big hurdle we had to overcome.
Not to mention your work schedule and mine, the things that we were involved with at the time operationally on behalf of the Air Force.
Yeah, absolutely. But Colin, that's kind of what we do as airmen, right? It doesn't matter. Time, space, we're there. We got you. Yes, good news on my end. The Air Force has seemed to decide to place special trust in me and promote me to the next grade. So that is exciting coming up. And also I was selected to be a director of operations of a squadron. So those are some pretty big things that have happened in my life.
Yeah. So if it's not clear, and if anybody is joining us for the very first time, one, welcome. Thank you for your support. But two, Reed, you're currently a captain, about to put on major, and that actually signals a pretty significant change for you as an officer and the development of your career.
Yeah, the fact that it's here, I'm not really sure that I'm ready. I didn't say that out loud. Yes, I'm ready. The people who have promoted me, but it still gives you something to think about, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to learn along with you over the course of the next year as you put that rank on and experience the change that comes with it. My big news from this last year is that my wife gave birth to a healthy baby boy. We now have 3 boys, and it is all sorts of craziness here at the Slade household.
Yeah, I was going to say, and all the madness that comes with that.
Yeah, but it's fun. It's a good time. He's healthy. We're all doing really well. Also, on the Air Force side of things, I finished up my active duty tour with Air Force ROTC as a voluntary limited period of active duty service, or VLPAD member, and have returned to the Air Force Reserve. This also includes the opportunity for me to cross-train into the 13 Sierra Career Field Space Operations Officer, which we have covered in a couple of different interviews over the last year. If you haven't had a chance to go check those out, highly recommend it. Those interviews have gotten me so excited about the opportunity ahead of me. I cannot wait. I'm so excited to get to Vandenberg and start my training.
Yeah, and along with that, the Air Force decided to give birth to the Space Force.
I see what you did there.
Hey, that's what they pay me for. Just kidding. Anyway, but yeah, so now we are no longer the child of the Army. We are a parent to the Space Force. The heritage and legacy of our service is only growing. And that'll give you also an opportunity to potentially cross into the black. I'm not really sure what they're going to call it, but yeah.
Cross into the vacuum of space. So many great phrases coming out over the next few years. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic. But in all seriousness, to be a part of history like that, it's pretty neat. It's a privileged position that we're in.
Yeah. And then the last thing that happened, a big milestone or big event as part of my transition out of active duty and into the reserve, I managed to survive that despite COVID's attempt to destroy all for me. I landed really well as a client success manager for a company called BrainStorm. And even more recently, I have been hired by a company called Barbell Logic, which I've brought up on previous episodes over the last year. I have been hired by them both as a coach, but also to build their military sales pipeline. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, strength training has been a big part of our relationship, as well as, your last couple of years. And so it'll be interesting to see how this develops.
Yep, super excited about it. Okay, so let's move forward in our discussion of the last year. When we started talking about doing a podcast read, we realized that there was a gap in the information that was being provided to people who were either currently serving as Air Force officers regarding the development of their careers, the opportunities that were available to them, but also to those who are interested in becoming an officer and pursuing this profession. So I want to ask the question here, Reed. Did we succeed in filling that gap? Have we done what is necessary to provide that type of information and make sure that those currently serving officers and those who want to become one have what they need in order to be successful?
I hope so. And this is always tough, right? To say, well, how good are we? Right. How good am I doing? Well, so first and foremost, I want to say to anyone of our audience who's ever listened to even 5 minutes, we are listening. And if you have feedback for us, we are happy to take those spears. We're happy to take those attaboys, whatever you like to give us as an audience. We're doing it for you. Yes, Colin, you and I have gotten stuff out of this, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But when we see somebody on social media that we have not prompted share an episode with someone in an answer to their question, or when someone asks us a question and we can say, hey, let me send you a link to an interview on someone who discussed that topic or something like that. When those kinds of things happen, I feel like we're getting there. I feel like we've started to build some momentum in order to kind of close that gap. Do I think there's still work to be done? Yeah, I do. I still think there's more we can share. There's more we can offer. We'll talk about that when we get to our goals section. But I do. I feel like with the interaction with our audience, when we start to see people engage with the content, I feel like we're moving. And that has been very rewarding. And so I think we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, because anytime that someone makes the decision to share an episode, it's kind of like an endorsement, that they are saying, hey, this brought me value. It could potentially do the same for you, right? Or if an audience member sends us a question, they're placing some amount of trust in us to be able to provide them information that is going to be useful, that we can continue to provide value to them. So the fact that there is that level of engagement, that we have seen the number of questions come in, the very gracious compliments to us, as well as just data alone, the number of downloads, which we never expected, right?
No.
To that. And we'll get into that here in just a second. But I think all of these things kind of signal that at least part of our vector is correct. To your point earlier, yeah, there are certainly things that we can improve upon, and that is our goal moving forward. But agreeing with you, I think that we did pretty well for this last year.
Yeah. So with that, the last year, what does it look like? These are the kinds of things that will convince people to fund your project or to, follow what you have to say. So what do the numbers say, Colin?
Well, before we get into the numbers, I just want to say this is kind of like writing your OPR, right? That you collect the subjective accomplishments and then you try to find some concrete numbers, some data to actually back up what it is that you think that you've done, right? And then we're not going to write an actual OPR and put it out there. Maybe that would be fun.
That's like a really bad Air Force officer joke, but there are enough of us and we are that bad of people that it's actually would be funny, I guess.
Maybe we'll just make the invite that somebody from the audience who is interested in practicing their writing skills can take this episode and all the information that we provide, and they can write an OPR for us.
And if that comes our way, we will share it. We will like it. We will distribute through all means necessary. Kudos to you. But yes, it would actually be a tool, for some mentorship. That would be fantastic.
Okay. So let's jump off from there into the actual data itself. First of all, how much content have we put out there in the last year? This is episode number 54. So in the last year, we've put out 53 episodes, not including this one. And across those 53 episodes, we have attracted 37,000 downloads. That just blows my mind.
Yes. There are not that many officers in the Air Force. So that means it's likely somebody actually listened to something more than once. I mean, the realization that some form of intelligence decided 37,000 times that our musings together on late nights and early evenings and whatever else, we've managed to put together is valuable at some level, is humbling and shocking and exciting all at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, consider all of the things out there that are competing for our audience's attention, right? Just in the podcast space, there are so many great shows out there that people could choose to listen to, and yet they choose ours. Thank you. Honestly, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to wrap your mind around. That's a lot of people. I taught 80 students. I commissioned 80 people. And that number is shocking. 80 people, right? That I had at least some form of participation in their creation as an officer. But to think that 37,000 times, maybe I touched somebody, I just can't even think about that. It's massive.
Yeah. So again, to our audience, thank you for your support. We really, really appreciate it. And that number is extremely encouraging to us to continue providing this type of service. Also, over the last year, we produced 48 hours worth of content. Now, this one is a double-edged sword. This is something that I've been wondering about and would invite the feedback from our audience. Is that too much or is that too little? The majority of our episodes are about an hour long, especially the interviews when you take into account the actual interview itself and then the commentary that we provide afterward. So I want to know from our audience, do you need less or do you want even more than that? Or maybe it's just right and you're content with what we've been providing.
Yeah, absolutely. And over those 48 hours, you have heard from 17 different officers, one senior NCO, one civilian, representing 11 different career fields. And that is also a lot, but it's also not enough. And we'll talk about that in our goals. We definitely want to get some more coverage there. But yeah, 48 hours, you've been able to listen to quite a few different experiences, and your reaction to those has been really fun.
Yeah. And what we've learned from all of those different interviews is that no two Air Force experiences are exactly alike. That even in the same AFSC, like for example, we covered multiple interviews with pilots, multiple interviews with space operators, and even within those same AFSCs, the experiences have been completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. And what does that teach us as leaders? That one size doesn't fit all. We can't just use the same tool to solve every problem. I mean, everybody's got such a different experience. So what does it take to put out an hour podcast episode? I will say that at the beginning, I had no idea. And it's more than you'd think. Some of these episodes we've been working on for months. Some we write and put together and publish in 48 hours. It's really a mix of all the above. But, Colin, you've kind of put down some numbers here. What the typical podcast episode kind of looks like. Why don't you run us through that?
Yeah, the average has been all combined somewhere between 8 and 14 hours per episode. So 8 and 14 hours to produce about an hour long episode. And what all goes into that 8 to 14 hours is 1 to 3 hours of the actual writing / coordinating of the interview, the scheduling, that kind of stuff. There's the actual recording itself, which is going to be about an hour to maybe even 2 hours. Not everything that is said in the interviews makes it into the actual show itself, right? Sometimes just what actually makes it into the show is a conversation between us and the person who's doing the interview. We want to make sure that everything that is put out there in the public sphere represents well both the Air Force and the person who is speaking, right? And so we put a lot of effort into the recording, the interview, the commentary that goes along with it, and then the editing itself. This is where the vast majority of our time is spent.
Our time. Just own it, Colin. Your time. Colin's
Okay.
time. So yeah, he's doing a lot of work, you guys, and I'm grateful for it. So I just want to make sure you take that credit.
Okay. Well, thank you, Reed. I appreciate it. Yes. So the editing, I own the editing, and it takes about 5 to 8 hours per week, per episode, to produce that finished product. And then the last thing is another hour spent in the actual publishing of the show, getting it uploaded to the server, marketing it, getting it out there on social media, writing show notes, all of those things, so that we can present it in a consumable format.
Yeah, which we were not ready for. Let's just be honest. We have this harebrained idea. You had this harebrained idea, and I came along eventually willingly and eventually very enthusiastically. It's a labor of love, but we had no idea.
Yeah. But, looking back over the last year, yes, it was a lot of effort, but, that has been time very well spent. at least for me, okay, doing the 5 to 8 hours per week per episode, that is time that I get to spend with the interview over and over and over again, right? Or the discussions that you and I have on various different topics over and over and over again. And that has just really honed my understanding of what it means to be an Air Force officer. And I could not be more grateful for that time.
Yeah, we'll absolutely get to that more when we get to, what you and I are taking out of this. But there's also some other things that go into the production of an episode and getting it out there. It requires some dollar bills, Colin, like to get this stuff out there.
Yeah. So let's set the stage for this quick discussion about the money and resources that go into creating a show. The first thing here is that this is an unofficial Air Force podcast. We are not sponsored by the Department of the Air Force, Department of the Defense, or any other official government agency, right? So they are not paying for it. We are paying for it, right? We chose, and by we, I mean you and me, Reed, we chose to put our time, our money, our resources into the creation of this show. And we do not take sponsorships, right? If you listen to every single episode that we've released during this last year, you never once heard an ad or any sort of sponsorship, right? We may have mentioned companies. We may have encouraged you to go check out various different paid for services, but we have not received a single dollar from any of those, nor will we ever. Right? That is not the point and purpose of this show, is to make money. We are here to provide information. But it still takes money to put this show together. And I can tell you, it's not cheap. Our recording equipment is rather expensive. So is the hosting of the content library. And now we actually have a website, which we'll discuss a little bit later. But that website too cost money, right? And yet we still see value in doing this so that we can meet that ultimate goal, which we discussed earlier, of providing the information, making sure that currently serving officers and those who want to join this profession have the information necessary so that they can be successful in their training and their development over the course of their career.
Yeah. As you were talking about this, it reminded me of two things, two truisms. The first is a saying, there's no shortcut to any place worth going. I saw that, on a spiritual leader's desk, unattributed quote, but it's true. If you want to get somewhere that is of value, it requires effort. It requires some sort of remuneration. It requires your time. It requires something, but you can't just shortcut to that destination. And on the flip side, if I put on my, what can I learn as an Air Force officer in this regard? If you want to make change, it's going to require money. It's going to require money. And that's one of the key things that you have to know as an Air Force officer is how to manage resources appropriately. And so even in this example, you and I are learning, hopefully, how to be better at the requirements that are levied upon us by our nation.
Yeah, for sure. So, Reed, I got a question for you. With all of this that we've put out there over the last year, all the time that we've spent, the content, the episodes, and the astounding number of 37,000 downloads, who are the people who are actually listening to this? Do we know? Can we know?
So we can do a little bit. We can get some data from, some of the services that we are, publishing. They gather data, right? If you're not aware of this, that as you consume free media and other things that companies are gathering your data, welcome to the 21st century. It's time to get informed. So we know a little bit. We know that the age range is what I would term a military age male. That's an intellism for a possible legal combatant, right? So generally between the ages of 18-34, they make up just about 75% of all of our listeners. 72% of our audience appears, at least online, to be male. 28% female. That kind of aligns with the overall breakout of the Air Force officership when it comes to gender. So that makes sense. They're tuning in from some countries, the top 5 US, UK, Germany, Australia, and Italy. The US resulting in the overwhelming majority of the downloads, 94%, with the top cities being Pensacola, Atlanta, San Antonio, Dallas, and Chicago.
Yeah. What jumps out to you about any of that data?
Frankly, that there are large US military installations at these locations.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Except Chicago. That one struck me a little bit. I know there are bases in Illinois, but there just aren't exactly large installations near Chicago. That's the first thing. Also, no surprise that US is totally dominating that list. And then Pensacola, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. Pensacola is the number one city. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, okay. Something that jumps out to me is that, like you said, that the vast majority of our listeners seem to be coming from that military age male, and they're already serving. It seems that a lot of those who are tuning into our show are those who are either already enlisted or they're an officer, which surprises me because I expected to have our audience skew more toward the OTS crowd, if you will, those who aren't yet serving. And the way that we would have seen that in the data is more of like the big university cities, like New York or LA. Well, I guess San Antonio and Dallas are in there, but you know what I'm saying? That more of those university towns as opposed to locations that are similar or same to large Air Force installations.
On the flip side, this is where data gets tough, right? Some of the hardest places for the US military to recruit are on the coasts. So California and New York, the Northeast, those are generally very hard recruiting environments. And they typically have more favorable results recruiting in the South and Midwest. So it's kind of, it could be that we're recruiting that OTS talent. And we'll talk about that as we get into a little bit more about some of the episodes that seem to be garnering more response than others. But it could just be that the people that are around military installations and in generally military friendly areas traditionally could be more willing to listen. So it's chicken and the egg, potato, data analytics is tough stuff, but it is definitely interesting to look at.
Yeah. Cool. So from our audience and combining that with the information about what they're listening to, what do our audience members care about, Reed?
Apparently being a CISO, Colin.
Right?
So just to, peel the curtain back a little bit for our audience, back a couple months ago, we had an episode where we interviewed a recently graduated combat systems officer. And that episode positively exploded. It to date has garnered 4 times as many downloads as the next closest episode. And we're thrilled about that, but we're also super suspect. I'm not sure if, the CISO and his buddies just decided to set up a couple bots just to download the episode a lot. It's possible. Again, the number one city where downloads occurred was Pensacola. Colin, what's in Pensacola?
Naval Air Station Pensacola, where they train all combat systems officers.
Yeah, something like that. So, again, these things we're all kind of scratching our head. And maybe we're wrong. Maybe there really are, 4,000 plus people out there who just really want to know what CISO training's like. And that would be fantastic. But that was definitely pretty fun to see that.
Yeah. It was definitely an ego boost for those first couple of days. And then, we started to look askance at it and we're like, is this real?
Yeah. So from our audience, if you know that this is actually real and all your buddies were listening to this, we would love to hear about it.
Or if you didn't, go check the episode out now because it's a good one, right?
Yeah, it is a good one. Some of the next things that our audience seems to really respond to, 3 of the top 5 episodes are focused on the experience at officer training school. And so we seem to get a lot of interest on those episodes.
So I've got a theory on that.
Okay.
I think our audience just really likes to listen to you.
I think you're too kind.
No, for serious. So correlation is not causation, but let's just say this. Those OTS episodes are just fantastic. The stories that you shared, the amount of information that you provided is just really excellent. And there is nothing else like that out there in the interwebs, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a lack of information, which is one of the primary reasons that we're doing this whole thing. The information out there is a little thin on that. So hopefully that's been helpful for the audience.
Yeah, and we would love for those episodes to continue to be the most popular. So if you haven't listened to it, go check it out. If you have and you found value in it, share it with somebody else. If you know someone who is interested in going the OTS route, those are fantastic episodes, and I would highly encourage you to go listen to them again so that you can hear Reed's swooning voice.
All right. So, Colin, what are folks not listening to?
Apparently, they were not big fans of our holiday episodes. Those episodes were shorter by design because we wanted to give time back both to us and to you, our audience members, during that holiday season. But maybe it's that our audience members just wanted to listen to us that much more during that time. I don't know. What are you thinking?
Yes. It's really tough. Like you said, they maybe took that week off, to focus on being with their families. And if that's what they were doing, great. That's the right decision. At the same time, I thought they were good ideas, but maybe we won't do, special episodes like that around the holidays. It's hard to know. I will say the two other episodes that are in the bottom, this was really interesting to me when I saw these sitting there. We did a 5-part series actually, on a memo that our former Chief of Staff, General Goldfein, pushed out about what we were going to rate officers against. And 2 of those episodes ended up in the bottom. And admittedly, I think they're the ones that get the least amount of love from officer mentorship and the rearing of future officers. You don't talk about them as much, but they're just as important as the other 2. But managing resources and improving the unit, those just aren't seeing a whole lot of listens, Colin.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that is a pretty good reflection of what's going on in the Air Force, that there just isn't enough conversation around the managing of resources and how to innovate effectively to improve the unit. And looking forward, I think that is something that you and I want to help to correct a little bit. But even more than that, on an official level, General Brown, our new Chief of Staff, he's hinted at the importance of these 2 topics.
Hinted at. The word is accelerate, change, or lose. That seems pretty clear.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But I wholeheartedly agree with you that we're catching a signal here from what's going on in the broader Air Force.
Absolutely. So, Colin, at this point, I think, we've talked a little bit about this, but I would like to turn it over to us a little bit. We've talked about who our audience is, what we're understanding from them, the things they are apparently interested in, and things we're going to kind of look to for the future. But what have you and I learned? I think that's what I would like to talk a little bit about, because this has been a journey, unexpected, but incredibly rewarding. And for me, the number one thing I've learned is that I have a lot to learn. And I know that's such a cop-out.
Right.
But that's the thing. When you sit down, let's throw out a recent episode, the GI Bill, right? We talked about how in the episode, I in particular, because I hadn't used it, I didn't really see a need for it, I hadn't really paid it much attention. And there are numerous things like that you're going to confront and interact with. But I've been forced to confront those things. And when you are confronted regularly with things you have no knowledge about, and then you see the growing list, we haven't shared with our audience. We have a list of every episode that we've got coming up, and it's long. And as I look at that list and I think about how much work I had to do to even put out the last 52 episodes, I know nothing, Jon Snow. Like, I don't know anything. So you combine all that with this thing that we talked about, I'm being promoted here coming up very soon. And that's a transition period between the company grade officer ranks and the field grade officer ranks. I think about all the FGOs that I've interacted with over my career, how I look at them, what I expect from them, the wisdom, the experience, the calm, collected manner when everyone else is, losing their minds. You've got the old salty majors sitting in the corner, just calm, cool, collected. Everything's going to be fine. They say something wise and everything just gets fixed. And it's nerve-wracking to think that that time is now here. It's hard to believe. I look at my peers, some of us reported to Hawaii both as second lieutenants, and now we see our names on the list to be DOs of squadrons as majors. And I think, man, where did the time go? And am I that person? Have I grown enough? Am I worthy of this position? All those things are wrapped up. And, people, they don't see who you really are when they look at you. They don't see your life experience. They don't see your occupation. They don't see your family situation, your good day, your bad day. What they see is a rank, and they have expectations that go along with that. And I really hope that I'm ready and that I'm ready to measure up. But as you're confronted with all this knowledge you don't have, definitely gives me pause, at least. The last thing I wanted to talk about of what I've really taken out of this is I've gained a deeper appreciation and kind of reinvigorated myself on the value of deliberate creativity, deliberate thinking, deliberate writing. We haven't talked about that a whole lot on our podcast, the process we go through to create an episode. But we essentially come up with a topic or a question, and then you and I go off on our own and do research, and we learn, and we write, and then we go back and forth and discuss it. And there's a lot of value in that. And as I mentioned, as I've been confronted with these topics that I wasn't super familiar with, I've grown immensely. And I am certain that I would not have had that opportunity for growth had we not had this experience together.
Yeah, cannot agree more. And I'm really excited about continuing that process over the next year, especially as you take that next step in your officer development, putting the rank of major on, moving into a designated leadership position, if you will, as a director of operations, and taking so many of the things that we've discussed over this last year and trying to implement them in a unit. I am certain that's going to yield some very revealing conversations, at least between you and me, if not actual content for us to put out here on the show. So thank you for taking the lead on that, Reed. I appreciate you sharing the things that you learned. I want to do the same. I too am embarking on a new era in my service. As I mentioned earlier, I will be cross-training into space operations. I will not be putting on major in the immediate near future. I might put it on the next year. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how all that works out with my return to the Air Force Reserve and just kind of how the promotion system works there. But I'm excited about the opportunity to be a full-blown reservist, do the traditional 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, so that I can experience that for myself, but also provide that information to our audience on, hey, what it's like to be a part-time member of the military and balancing that with career and family and all of those other things. Over the last year, I have also learned that you mentioned the huge list that we have of all those topics, and that has shown me, as well as all the interviews and conversations that we've had, is that the Air Force is just so massive. It's vast and wide and deep, and there's so much there. And yet at the same time, it is so small. And we've talked about this.
Yeah. Jenny Runke, right? Like somehow you connected with this personality on Instagram. I taught with her at OTS. Like, come on, really?
Yeah. And I, as cadre, went to ROTC field training with Morella Big Mountain, who apparently you went to Intel school with.
Yeah, she was my flight leader at Intel school.
Yeah. And this is not an abnormal occurrence. This is normal for Air Force officers to make connections and build that network that is really so important and central to our success in day-to-day operations, right? And we're experiencing it here too in the podcast. So the Air Force is so big. There's so much to explore here. We could go down so many different rabbit holes, have so many different conversations about the opportunities and things that officers can pursue. But at the same time, it's small enough that there are common threads that run through all of our interviews, all of our episodes. And I wanted to just kind of pull those out a little bit and highlight them for our audience. The first one that comes to mind is that the Air Force as an institution is good, but it is not perfect. There are a huge number of wonderful career opportunities that we've seen and experienced with each of the officers that we've interviewed over the last year. But also through those same interviews, we've seen that the Air Force has many, many flaws. So the Air Force is good, but is not perfect. There is lots of room for improvement. And then the next one is that just like our Air Force, our officers are good, but they too are also not perfect. One thing that has been running through my mind as we've contemplated reviewing this last year is that we've had discussions about some of the issues with the training and development of our Air Force officers, right? And how we as officers are a product of that training, be it our assessance training, be it at the schoolhouse or our professional military education through SOS or whatever, right? We are a product of that training. But at the same time, we are still responsible for our own development. We are a product of our own choices. So yes, the Air Force has put us on this path to grow and develop in a very specific way, but at the same time, we are still individuals. We are still responsible for our own choices and our own growth and development.
Yeah. And that's something that I know you're going to get to in your next point. But the first 2 points you made out, the institution is good, but not perfect. There are opportunities and flaws. Officers are good, but not perfect. We're a product of our training. Both of those things are related by one single thing. You have an individual choice, and you have power to influence both of those things.
Yeah. Not only power, you have a responsibility, right?
Absolutely.
The ownership of your development is central and critical, that you can't just accept whatever the Air Force is going to provide you because what did I just say? What did we just say? It's not perfect. It's not going to get it right in every circumstance. And so you need to recognize that and make sure that you are doing what is best for you, for your career, for your family, not compromising any of your principles, so that at the end of every single day and at the end of your career, you're able to say, I did my best on behalf of the Air Force, on behalf of myself, my airmen, of my family, and your God if you have one.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think that leads right to your next point, Colin.
Yeah, it certainly does. That there are things that we absolutely just cannot control. But the things that matter most, you definitely can control, and you must, right?
With violence of action. Like you can't just control it passively. Like you must absolutely, with 100% violence of action, control these things.
Yeah, it's a Jocko Willink phrase. Default aggressive.
Oh.
Yeah. Go read Extreme Ownership and Dichotomy of Leadership, and you'll learn about the principle default aggressive. Okay, so last thing that I've learned is that as wonderful as this year has been, as wonderful as it is to put this podcast together, I've recognized that podcasting is insufficient. That for us to do exactly what we were talking about, taking ownership of your growth and development, that getting information through any medium, including podcasting, is not enough. It's just too passive, right?
It's too passive for our audience. And I think that's what you and I are getting at, right? Like you and I, by doing this, we are getting just a lot out of this. And I think we're concerned that we aren't providing that same experience for our audience.
Yeah, exactly. That we want our audience to gain what we have gained out of this creative and critical thinking process of engaging with this material and putting it into action, we are putting it into the action of a podcast, but hopefully we are also taking the information and putting into action on behalf of the Air Force in our unit, in our day-to-day operations, right? And we want our audience to do exactly the same.
Yeah, totally concur.
So, Reed, how are we going to do that? Looking ahead to this next year, how can we take this podcasting medium and the information that we provide here and set up our audience in such a way so that they can gain more out of it? How can we provide more value to them? What are we looking ahead to over this next year?
First, I'll talk about what's going to stay pretty much the same. So we're going to continue as best as able to continue to release a weekly episode on Wednesdays, just like we have. We think there's real value there. We get something out of it. We think the audience is getting something out of it. So that will continue as best as able. We'll talk about, I'm going to have a move and you might go to training. So, there's a lot that could happen that could derail that intent. But right now, that's what we're looking at. We're going to continue to get those interviews, but, try to get more of that library of different career fields, different people with their experiences and developmental opportunities in order to help you make decisions about your career. We're also going to start to really dig deep into not just what officership is and what these career fields are, but maybe what they could be, what they should be. We're going to really dig deep into that idea about what does it mean to be a leader.
Yeah, the idea here, the hope here is that we can initiate some discussion, maybe even some uncomfortable conversations about what the Air Force has right, but more importantly, where it can improve, right? With respect to officership specifically, because that's what this show is about. Yeah, there's lots of conversation going on right now about great power competition and our acquisition programs and those kinds of things. And there's some element of officership there, but that's not our expertise, and that's likely not where we're going to go. We want to stay focused instead on the things that we know are important to officership, such as executing the mission, leading airmen, managing resources, ding, 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 innovating, ding, 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 and how we as an institution, as a department of the Air Force, as an Air Force and a Space Force can be better and produce better for the missions that are coming toward us.
Exactly. Because it's the leadership that's going to enable all of those other things that we're talking about. Acquisitions, it's a leadership failure. Our inability to appropriately adjust to the great power competition in time, that's a leadership problem. Yes, that's oversimplification. I recognize that, but that's how we can make the biggest impact in those areas.
Yeah. Another Jockoism here that you'll see in extreme ownership is there are no bad teams. There are only bad leaders.
Yeah. Well, I'm buying. That makes a whole lot of sense to me. So along with that slight shift in focus and in our intent, you're going to see a couple of new things. So first, Colin has put in a ton of work and launched a beautiful new website, airforceofficerpodcast.com, which is live now. Go check it out. It's fantastic. And along with that, we're going to be making some changes to some of our social media and interactions with our audience.
Yeah. First and foremost, we've had a very successful run over the last year with the Facebook discussion group. It has produced some pretty important discussions and has been a great place for members of our audience to engage with us and with each other. But there are some issues with Facebook that are just kind of insurmountable, that we feel that the right way forward is to shut down that discussion group. So as of tomorrow, that Facebook group will be closed, but we've got a replacement for you.
Yep. So Colin has, again, worked really hard and built a really awesome heritage room. So for those of our audience who don't know, a heritage room is typically like a squadron bar or a break room. It's just a part of your physical facilities where people can, relax a little bit, shoot the watch, talk about the, war stories and kind of relax maybe on a Friday or after a big event. But the important thing that happens in the Heritage Room is the interaction with your fellow airmen. And that's what we're trying to build here in our virtual Heritage Room.
Yeah, there's an opportunity there for us to talk officership, discuss the content, to, as you say, shoot the watch. Reed, do you want to talk about what shoot the watch means?
Yeah, so shoot the watch, if you imagine someone who wears a watch on one wrist or the other, if they were to put the watch hand in front of them and then get their other hand and point at the watch, it looks like aircraft flying. And so pilots have used this ism for generations to describe their air-to-air tactics, to share war stories. So there I was, 10 o'clock high, this bad guy came in on my 6, you can kind of see the fingers, the hands going out as they start to, take action to describe this aerial combat. And shoot the watch has become an aphorism for, hey, we're just going to sit around and shoot the bull and talk and share war stories.
Yeah, so that's going to happen in the Heritage Room, and you're welcome to be there, participate in it. It's going to be both in written form, obviously, because it's an internet platform. It functions essentially like a forum. However, we are also going to host Friday Zoom chats where we're going to open up Zoom and get on and have discussions together, because it's not enough for us to just type back and forth. We also want to see face to face, talk to each other, have this dialogue like you and I are having, Reed, because it's central to our development as officers to have those kinds of discussions.
And plus, you're all Zoom experts now that you've been locked in your, own houses for the last 6 months, so it should go pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to the website, airforceofficerpodcast.com, and sign up for the Heritage Room, and we look forward to seeing you there.
All right, now we want to move on to talk about a couple more of our goals before we wrap up. So, in accordance with our episode on goals, which also didn't get a whole lot of love, by the way, important, you got to set goals, you got to assess self. We keep saying it. So, we've got a couple SMART goals. Colin, why don't you lead us off with the first one here?
Yeah, for sure. So, keeping in mind what we've said about what it takes to produce an episode and the things that we are expecting to happen over the next year, we still want to release one episode every week. We've already got the outline built. It's not concrete. There is plenty of room for flex in there, but we have an idea of what we want to talk about over the next year, and we'll continue to release one episode per week during that time.
So again, I already mentioned this. I'm going to pack up my entire house and all of our crap, and I'm going to move somewhere across country. And so that may slow things down that week. Hopefully we'll be able to, get in front of that. Colin, you may be going to Vandenberg for 6 months, geo-batching it out there on California. So there's all sorts of things that could throw that off. But right now we're stating it here. We would like to continue to produce an episode a week.
And in support of that, we have some ideas about how to be more effective in that effort. We want to get more people involved in the creation and publishing of the show in order to make it more sustainable so that we can provide better content in a timely manner. And to that end, we are going to hire an intern to help with some of the editing, the publishing over the next year.
Yeah, some of that back end stuff, transparent to you, but it'll make things a lot easier on us and help us to continue to produce content. So to go along with that mention of, trying to make things a little bit more efficient, one thing we've noticed is that we are still lacking in, we haven't built the entire library of AFSCs. It's been really nice when someone says, oh, I've got a son or daughter thinking about becoming a pilot. I can say, well, if you would turn to episode 11, 13, and 14, it's really nice to be able to give them those episodes to give them some idea, but we haven't got them all. And there are a number of officer career fields that are available for new officers that we just haven't covered. And so by this time next year, we would like to have at least 90% of the AFSCs that Air Forces are able to join covered. Now, why do we say the new officers are able to join? Well, some AFSCs are reserved for special folks, commanders, general officers, astronauts. Those are generally things that you can't just sign up and become. Those are only awarded after certain things. And so we want to make sure that for those that are joining the Air Force and will be awarded an AFSC, we'd like to have at least 90% of those options covered, so you can use them and share them with your friends.
That being said, we do at some point obviously want to have conversations about being a commander. What is it like to lead a squadron? What is it like to be an astronaut and go up into space? What is it like and what does it take to be a general officer? We do want to get there, but they don't fill that bucket, that content library of the possible officer career field. So definitely that's something that we want to pursue.
Last thing, we have been lacking in one pretty key area, Colin. We are not joint enough. We need to get some of our other services involved with the podcast. So I'm going to count the Coast Guard in here and say we would like to have, by this time next year, 4 of the 6 major components to have contributed to the Air Force Officer Podcast, specifically to outline what we as Air Force officers need to know about their service. So I'm talking Marines, Navy, Army, Space Force, Coast Guard. Those are the folks that we're talking about. We would like to get 4 of the 6.
Well, remember, just last week, we released the episode with retired Commander Vincent Aiello. But to your point, yeah, we need to do better at that because we don't ever operate strictly on our own. And that is another one of General Brown's initiatives, is to ensure that we are playing joint, that we are training joint, that we are fighting joint, because that is the way of the future. That is how we will find success.
Yeah. And, I'm in a joint program, and it has been very enlightening as I've worked with my peers to hear about their perspectives on things. And we need to bring that to our audience. So that is absolutely something we want to get done this next year.
Great. Yeah. So those 4 goals cover our SMART goals, our time-bound goals, what we hope to accomplish over the next year. But it's not enough just to have SMART goals, Reed. Those who have listened to the goal setting episode will understand the importance of having stretch goals or Everest goals. And so we want to go there next.
So the first Everest goal, and it's hard to even admit that I'm saying this out loud because on the face of it, if you would have said this to me a year ago, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But bottom line, we would really know that we have delivered something of value if we were able to get to 100,000 downloads. Now, how long that's going to take, I'm not really sure. But 100,000 downloads, Colin, I think that's a real stretch goal for us.
Now, are you talking another 100,000 or 100,000 cumulative?
100,000 cumulative. If we continue at the rate we're going right now, in theory, we'll have about 80,000 in another year. And that's a lot. But what would it take? It would take more effort from us. It would take improving our delivery. It would take improving our targeting. It would take improving our marketing, things that would push us in areas that we're not comfortable in or that we're succeeding in right now. And that's why I think 100,000, we would be really getting better at what we're doing if we were able to get that.
Yeah. So that is 1.5 times what we've done in this last year, and where we've averaged about 3,000 to 4,000 downloads a month. So in order to get there, we would need to get over 5,000, almost 6,000 downloads per month in order to reach that. That is definitely a stretch goal, not impossible. And that's one of the important elements of a stretch goal or an Everest goal, is that it's reachable, but you have to take those next steps in order to get there.
Colin, what's the next stretch goal that you've got in mind?
Okay, so on this one, this goes back to the money discussion. Again, want to emphasize here, the point of this show is not to make money. That's not why we are here. However, it does take money to produce this show. And so the goal here is over the next year to break even. Not wanting to turn a profit. We just want to cover the costs of producing this show so that we can make it sustainable. Plus, on top of that, a good sign, just like the 100,000 downloads, that you are providing something of value is that people in turn are willing to pay for it, right? If they didn't value it, they wouldn't give up their money for it. So in support of that, there will be opportunities over the next year for members of the audience to buy services, and all of those proceeds will go back to support the show. So the first opportunity there is that starting October 1st, we are going to offer a 6-module course on Air Force officership, which is designed to provide the opportunity for anyone who is currently serving or wants to be an officer to better understand what it means to be an officer and how to be more effective in your day-to-day operations. You can learn more about that course on the website, airforceofficerpodcast.com. And just want to say here, the pricing structure is based on pay grade. Now, this is a normal thing within the military, that those who are of a higher pay grade will pay a little bit more, and those who are of the lower grade will pay less. And there's also an opportunity for those who are already commissioned, those who are officers, can sponsor enlisted airmen to participate in this course. The idea here being that we as leaders have the responsibility of building more leaders. And this is one way that you can do that. You can sponsor an airman to participate in this course on Air Force officership that will help them toward their goal, if they have one, of receiving a commission. Now, let's be honest and upfront here. This is not a commissioning program, but it is designed to make you a more effective officer if you are one, or when you receive that commission, you'll have the information necessary to be as effective as you can be.
Awesome. Well, Colin, I think that about wraps it up. We want to give a couple parting thoughts. First and foremost, and again, most sincere, we want to thank our audience for engaging with us. This has been an incredible journey, an unexpected one, and there's a lot that's going on right now. We just had our 22nd Chief of Staff sworn in. COVID life has not been pleasant. There is social unrest in the nation. We have a federal election coming up. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But engaging with you, our audience, has been incredibly rewarding. Getting that email with a question that maybe you were hesitant to ask somebody else. We feel incredibly privileged to be able to field those, to see our podcast shared with somebody to answer their questions. We feel incredibly honored and privileged that that's happening. And even with everything going on, Colin, I am excited. I'm excited by the new Space Force. I'm excited by the possibility of change. We've already hinted at it, but CQ Brown, our new Chief of Staff, just released his vision, his guiding document, if you will. And it says, accelerate, change, or lose. And that sounds kind of scary and heavy, but I'm excited that someone's up there, driving this change. And I'm excited about the Air Force. So Colin, happy 73rd Air Force birthday to you. And here's the 73 more.
Yeah, absolutely. And happy 9 months to the Space Force. And here's to at least 9 months more, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Reed. I'm so excited about what's going on with the Air Force right now. General Brown, Chief Bass, as his Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, they're going to be an incredible team. The vision that they're putting out there is excellent, and I'm excited to be along the ride. And we are definitely going to do everything we can with this podcast and the peripheral elements to it to support that vision, to make our Air Force as successful as it can be in this next year and the many years that come after it.
And with that, that concludes another episode of Commission Ed.